Hi guys, it's the 49th day and I'm gonna continue reading, but I realized that the story I'm gonna read today is too long. So I'm gonna split it by two parts, and today I'm gonna read the first part. So let's begin. Hearts and Crosses. Baldy Woods reached for the bottle and got it. Whenever Baldy went for anything, he usually, but this is not Baldy's story. He poured out a third drink that was larger by a finger than the first and the second. Than the first and second. Baldy was in consultation, and the consultee is worthy of his hire. I'd be kind if I was you, said Baldy. So so positively that his hostel creaked and his purse rattled. Webb Jaeger pushed back his flat brimmed Stetson and made further disorder in his straw-colored hair. The ton, tonsorial, the tonsorial recourse being without a veil, he followed the liquid example of the more resourceful Baldy. If a man marries a queen, it's often to make him a two-spot, declared Webb, epitomizing his grievances. Not sure, said Baldy, sympathetic, but still thirsty and genuinely solicitous, solicitous, concerning the relative value of the cards. By rights, you are kind. By rights, you are a king. If it was you, I'd call for a new deal. The cards have been stacked on you. I'll tell you what you are, Webb Yager. What? Asked Webb, with a hopeful look in his pale blue eyes. You're a prince cons- consort. You're a prince consort. Go easy, said Webb. I never blackguarded you known. I never blackguarded you known. It's a title, explained Bolly, up among the picture cards, but it didn't take no tricks. I'll tell you, Webb. I will tell you, Webb. It's a brand they've got for certain animals in Europe. Say that you, or me, or one of them, dukes, marries in the royal family. Well, by and by, our wife gets to be queen. Are we king? Not in a million years. At the coronation ceremonies, we merge between Little Casino and the nin- ninth Grand Custodian of the Royal Hall Bedchamber. The only use we are is to appear in photographs and accept their responsibility for their apparent hair apparent for the hair apparent. That's ain't my square deal. Yes, Sir Webb, you're a prince consort, and if I was you, I'd start a Interan interregnum 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 inter or a habis, corpus, or something. And I would be king if I had to turn from the bottom of the desk. Baldy em- emptied, emptied, emptied his glass to the ratification of his warped pose. Baldy, said Webby solemnly, solemnly, me and you pushed cows in the same outfit for years. We've been running, we been running on the same range and reading the same trails since we are boys. I wouldn't talk about my family affairs to nobody but you. You was right line rider of the Nopalto Ranch when I married Santa McAllister. I was foreman then, but what am now? What am I now? I don't amount to a knot in a stake rope. I don't amount to a knot in the stake rope. When old McAllister was the castle king of the West Texas, continued Baldy with satanic sweetness, you was some tallow. You had as much to say on the ranch as he did. I did, admitted Webb. Up to the time we found out I was trying to get my rope over Santa's head. Then he kept me out on the ranch as far from the ranch house as he could. When the old man died, they commenced to call Santa the castle queen, the cattle queen. I'm boss of the cattle, that's all. She stands to all the business, to the all business. She handles all the money. I can't sell even a beef steer to a party of campers myself. Santa's the queen, and I'm Mr. Nobody. I would be king if I was you, repeated Baldy Woods, the royalist. When a man marries a queen, he ought to grape up with her, to grade up with her, on the hoof, dressed, dried, corned, any old way of the chaparral to the package house. A lot of folks thinks it's funny, Web, and y- that you don't have the say so on the no- Nopaliato. I ain't reflecting none of Miss Yager. She's the finest little lady between the Rio Grande and the next Christmas. But a man ought to be boss of his own camp. Death move, death move. Brown face of Jaeger lightened, lented, lent to a mask of wounded melancholy. With that expression and his rumpled yellow hair and guileless blue eyes, he might have been likened to a schoolboy whose leadership had been us- usurped by a youngster of superior strength. Strange, strength. But he's active as and sinewy, 72 inches, and his graded revolvers forbade the comparison. What was that you called me, Baldy? He asked. What kind of concert was it? A concert, corrected Baldy. A Prince consort. It's it's a kind of shortcut pseudonym. You come and sort of between Jack High and four card flush. Web Yager sighted and gathered the strap of his witch Winchester scrapped from the floor. Scabbard from the floor. I'm reading back to the ranch today, he said half-heartedly. I've got to start a bunch of beevies for San Anthony in the morning. I'm your company as far as Dry Lake, announced Baldy. I've got a round up camp on the San Marcos cutting out 2-year-olds. The two companeros mounted their ponies and trotted, trotted away from a little railroad settlement, where they had foregathered in the thirsty morning. At Dry Lake, when their roads diverged, 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 they reined up for a parting cigarette. For miles, for miles they had ridden in silence, save for the soft drum of the pony's hoofs on the matted mesquite mesquite grass and the rattle of the chaparral against their wooden stirrups. But in the Texas, but in Texas, discourse is seldom continuous. You may feel in a mile and meal. You may feel in a mile a meal, and a murder between your paragraphs without detriment to your thesis. So without apology, Webb officed an addendum to the conversation that had begun 10 miles away. You remember yourself, Baldy, that there was a time when Santa wasn't quite so independent. You remember the days when old McAllister was keeping up us apart, and how she used to send me the sign that she wanted to see me. Old man Mac promised to make me look like a colander. Colander. if I ever come in gunshot of the ranch. You remember the sign she used to send Baldy, the heart with a cross inside of it? Me? Cried Baldy, when with intoxic- intoxicated archness. You old sugar stealing coyote. I don't remember. Why? You dad blamed old longhorned turtle, though the boys in the camp was all cogno cognoscious about them hieroglyphs. The gizzard and crossbones, we used to call it. We used to see them on truck that was sent out from the ranch. It was marked in charcoal of the sacks of flour and in a lot in lead pencil on the newspapers. I see one of them once chalked on the back of a new cook that old man McAllister sent out from the ranch. Danced if I didn't. Santa's father explained Webb gently, got her to promise that she wouldn't write to me or send me any word. That heart and cross, that heart and cross sign was her scheme. Whenever she wanted to see me in particular, she managed to put that mark on something at the ranch that she knew I would see. And I never laid eyes on it, but what I burnt the wind from the ranch the same night. I used to see her in that commode back of the little horse corral. I know that, chanted Baldy, chanted Baldy. But we never let on. We was all for you. We knowed. Why you always kept that fast paint in camp. And when we see this gizzard and crossbones figured out on the truck from the ranch, we knowed old Pinto was going to eat up Miles that night instead of grass. You remember Scurry, that educated horse wrangler we had, the college fellow that Tanglefoot drove to the ranch. Whenever Scurry saw that "Come meet your honey" brand on anything from the ranch, he would wave his hand like that and say, "Our friend Lee Anders Andrews, Lee Andrews, will again swim the House Point tonight." The last time Santa sent me this sign, said Webb, was once when she was sick. I noticed it as soon as I hit camp, and I galloped Pinto 40 mile that night. She wasn't at the Commonwealth. I went to the house, and old McAllister met me at the door. Did you come here to get killed? Says he. I'll disob- disoblige you for once. I just started a Mexican to bring you. Santa wants you. Go in that room and see her, and then come out here and see me. Santa was lying in bed pretty sick, but she gives out a kind of a smile, and her hand and mine lock horns, and I sat down by the bed, mud and spurs and chops and all. I've heard you reading across the grass 4 hours, Webb, she says. I was sure you'd come. You saw the sign, she whispers. The minute I hit camp, says I. It's one that was marked on the back of potatoes and onions. They always together, says she, soft like always together in life. They go well together, I says, in a stew. I mean hearts and crosses, says Santa. Our sign to love, and to suffer. That's that's what they mean. And there was old Doc Musgrove. Musgrove. I'm using amusing himself with whiskey and palm leaf fan. And by Santa goes to sleep. And Doc feels her forehead, and he says to me, "You are not such a bad febrifuge, but you'd better slide out now. For the diagnosis, don't call for you in regular dose. The little lady will be all right when she wakes up. I seen old McAllister outside. She's asleep, say I. And now you can start with your colon colander work. Take your time. For left my gun on my saddle horn, old McLaws, and he says to me, pumping, pumping lead into the best ranch boss in West Texas. Don't seems to me good business policy. I don't know where I could get as good a one. It's the son-in-law idea, web that makes me admire for to use you as a target. You ain't my idea for a member of the family, but I can use you on the Nopalito if you'll keep outside of the radius with a ranch house in the middle of it. You go upstairs and lay down on a cot. And when you get some sleep, we'll talk it over. Baldy Woods pulled down his hat and uncurled uncurled his leg from his saddle horn. Webb shortened his rein and and his pony danced, anxious to be off. The two men shook hands with Western ceremony. Adios, Baldy, said Webb. I'm glad I see you and had this talk. With a pounding rush that sounded like the rise of a covey of the quail, the riders sped away towards different points of the compass. 100 yards of his house Baldy reined in on the top of a bear. No, a bear, no, and emitted a yell. He swayed on his horse, and he'd been on his horse. Had he been on foot, the earth would have risen. And conqueror, conquered him. But in the saddle, he was a mister of equilibrium, and laughed at whiskey, and despised the center of gravity. Webb turned in his saddle at the signal. If I was you, came Baldy's strident and perventing tones, I'd be king. At 8 o'clock of the following morning, Bud Turner rolled from his saddle in front of the Nopaliato ranch house and stumbled with whizzing rowels towards the gallery. Bud was in charge of the bunch of beef cattle that was to strike the trail that morning for San Antonio. Mr. Yeager was on the gallery watering a cluster of hyacinths, uh, hyacinths growing in the red ear earth, earthenware jar. Interesting. King McAllister had bequeathed to his daughter many of his strong characteristic characteristics. His resolutions, this his gay courage, his contumacious self reliance, his pride, as a reigning monarch of hoofs and horns. Allegra and Fortissimo had been McAllister's tempo and tone. In Santa Daisy wife transposed in Santa Daisy wife transposed to the feminine key. Substan- Substantially, she preserved the image of the mother who had been summoned to wander in order to endless finite green pastures, pas- pastures long before the waxen hearts of king had conferred royalty upon the house. She had her mother's slim, strong figure and grave, soft prettiness that relieved in her the severity of the imperious McAllister eye and the McAllister air of royal independence. Webb stood on one end of the gallery, giving orders to two or three sub bosses of various camps and outfits who had ridden in for instructions. Alright, guys, we're gonna take a break till tomorrow and continue. Continue tomorrow. See you then. Bye. Thank you for listening to me.